Hey, it's James from Marketing for Restaurants here, and welcome to episode 166 of Secret Sauce, the restaurant marketing podcast, the top 10 restaurant marketing trends for 2023.
Some restaurants are quiet, lose money, and the owner works 70 hours a week. Other restaurants are busy, profitable, and the owners work a few hours a day. What's the difference? They have a secret sauce. Join James from Marketing for Restaurants as he helps you come up with your recipe for restaurant success. Your secret sauce.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is our first one for 2023. How time flies. We were a little bit light on for podcasts last year, but we're really looking to increase the number of podcasts that we're doing. I was a little busy last year. I went back to uni to do some postgraduate studies, learned a lot of things about a lot of our different areas, and some of that hopefully will help you and your business. Looking back at the stats for last year's podcast, our most popular one was the one that we last released, and that was restaurant marketing tips for restaurant profitability. No surprises there, a very tough year in 2022. Many restaurants still working through COVID, and COVID is still with us now. But in Australia, we're seeing a very much living with COVID approach, which is good. The economy is really starting to picking up dramatically. And that is going to feed into some of the things that we see as being the big trends. So our trends podcasts are always popular podcasts each year that we do them. And I think that's because of the fact that we're independent. So we're not actually trying to push anyone's product. We've got a global view, so we work with restaurants around the world. And I think we take a little bit more of an advanced approach to coming up with our trends. We start with the macroeconomic trends that we see. We marry that up with what we are seeing from our customers, the pain points, the opportunities, the changes in the marketplace. And we sort of marry that all together. And then where we think things like technology is going to be taking the industry, we put all of that together, and that is what gives us our trends. And, you know, by and large, they've been fairly successful, I think. So this is why the podcasts, our trends podcasts, are so popular. So 2023, what do we think is going to happen? Everyone that I've been talking to, there's a few things that are really big that have changed in the last 12 months, and some things that are still there. So first off, we've got inflation and interest rates. Now, inflation is creating a significant amount of problems for restaurants around the world. So what's happened is that banks have been pumping the economy during all of the time of COVID and for a little bit while before that to try and keep the economies going so that once COVID was gone, there'd actually be some sort of economy, that there'd be a few people with jobs. So they've done the right thing. Have they put too much fuel on the fire? That's a really good question. I think they probably have, because inflation has reared its ugly head and it is really painful for a lot of businesses and a lot of consumers. That is going to be impacting on everyone. We'll talk about inflation where we see it in the trends, so we will sort of flesh that out. But of course, the flip side of the inflation coin is interest rates. So we are seeing interest rates now really starting to rise. And I read earlier this year, or a couple of months ago, that the Federal Reserve in the United States was going to keep jacking up interest rates until enough people had lost their jobs. That is a really scary thought. And that is going to really impact a lot of consumers. We are already seeing consumers starting to tighten their belt just because of the fact that they are paying a lot more for their mortgage. This is particularly true in Australia, where a lot more people have variable interest rates, but it's also occurring in the United States, in the United Kingdom. Labor. It is hard to get people to work because many countries close their borders to many of the people who would normally work in a restaurant. So in Australia, it's backpackers, it's uni students. We haven't had them for 2 years. I know in our state alone, in Victoria, we're about 250,000 people behind. So that takes some pressure out of the economy, but it also makes it very difficult to find labor because people have been putting wages up in an effort to try and get people to come and do their job. Very, very difficult. that is going to be a big factor that will go into some of the trends. We'll talk about that as well. One good factor I see is that there's going to be less competition. There is less competition in the market. And I think, finally, this is one of those things. And look, I've been talking for a long time about the fact that in a market where we are really closely connected, so in some places in the United States, we've got a pretty good lowdown. We've got multiple customers sort of feeding back really good information. In Australia, where we've got a lot of customers, I would say that the restaurant industry is really good apart from the bottom 10%. And it's that bottom 10% that needs to go. We're seeing some restaurants at the high end, some restaurants in the middle, and some restaurants down at the bottom closing up their doors. Our local favorite Indian restaurant, they closed their doors during 2022, and I gave them a call. So they used Frollo, our free restaurant online ordering system. They had an awful website, not from us. I told them on multiple times that they had issues with their website, and they just closed the doors because they were tired for two reasons. One, they were struggling to get staff, and two, they were working really, really long hours. Now, they were working really long hours because of the lack of profitability, the lack of customers who were coming in. We were quite loyal. We'd ordered a lot from them. We helped them out with online ordering analysis. So we looked at their Frollo data to help them understand what it meant. And we were one of their most loyal customers. Now, that's partially because I really love a curry on a Friday night. But the other thing was, I think that they could have had a lot more regular customers, those kind of customers that for a regional, local Indian restaurant, that's the heart and soul of your profitability, heart and soul of your cash flow. But on a mobile phone and on a full desktop browser, you couldn't actually use the online ordering button because it didn't work. It didn't display properly. You had to change the size of it because their web developer had made some sort of crazy template that didn't work on desktops. Well, that's not a hanging offense because most people are on their mobile. Didn't work on mobile either. Really quite the tragedy. And I reckon that they could have seen a 20 or 30% increase in revenue had they just had a website that worked for them. But that was just one of those factors. They were tired. They'd been running the restaurant for about 15 years, and it was time for them to move on. Had they had more revenue, they probably would have hung around a bit. They lacked the profitability to get more labor, and even if they had that profitability, they may not have been able to get the labor anyway. Big factors that we are seeing. That's something that's affected me. It means that I've got to find another place to get a vindaloo, and to be honest, we've tried most of them, and it's not that easy. That story is being told with various rhymes around the world. For those that are closing down, very sad, the end of a dream. Usually these things, they end up with a financial loss, and that's really sad. But critically, for the market in general, for the industry in general, it's got to be a good thing, particularly in a labor-constrained industry. Many of those people who worked in that restaurant, they will have tried to go and get work in other restaurants. And so that is one of those good things. The other thing that we are seeing sort of continuing on from 2022, supply issues, cost and availability. So we've got an inflation issue as it comes into the ingredients that you're putting into all of your meals, as well as the availability. It is still spotty in some areas. Now, critically, these are big macroeconomic trends. They are global trends. It is most important that you think about what is happening in your country, what is happening in your state, what is happening in your town. What is happening in your town? We're going to be talking about customers and the amount of cash that customers have got to spend on restaurants, because that is really important. That is critical to you and your restaurant, your livelihood, your business. That may be very different to a town 10 kilometres away, 10 miles away. Just across county borders, just across state lines, just across country borders, things will change quite dramatically. So you need to be out there talking to other local business owners, talking to other restaurants, talking to customers, talking to your staff, finding out what you think those trends are going to be. Because the things that I say, I'm developing a podcast for the entire world. Your little part of it, your little neck of the woods, that could be very different to what we're seeing. But in general, I think that most of these are going to hold. And whether they do or not, if you think about what it is that's happening locally, you're going to be able to come up with your trends. And I've got to tell you, if you are able to come up with the trends in the industry, in your area, if you can do that, and if you can do that better than the other restaurant owners, you're going to be skating to where the puck is going to be. You're going to be running. You are really well placed to run a very profitable restaurant. So it's really important that we get these things right, I think. So the first one that I see is the changes in vegetarianism. Now, we've talked about vegetarian customers for a while now. What I think we're going to see is an increase in flex and a decrease in fake. When you look at the share price of Beyond Meat, one of the leading faux meat manufacturers, their price has gone down from a peak of around $250 US to about $13. In 2021, it was around $200 at its peak, now down to $13. What is that telling you? It has to be around a decrease in demand for meat that is derived from these methodologies. And look, I think it is because of the fact that people are looking at what is in the ingredients, what's on the packet, what's written on the packet. And you know what? There's a few scary things in there. And I think, particularly when you look at sodium, people are looking at it and thinking, this is a really processed product. Maybe this isn't the kind of thing that I want to be putting in my body. In the long term, I think we'll see more of it because of those really big trends. It's getting more and more expensive to have cattle, which is the old-fashioned way of getting meat. And then you've got the greenhouse effect as well. So you've got those big trends that are going to be against it. But I can't help but think that Beyond Meat, with their current processes, and it's not just Beyond Meat, it's the others in there as well, they have jumped the gun on this. It's a great idea. It's a really powerful idea. But what people want is they want a vegetarian option that tastes like meat, but has the health advantages of vegetarian food as well. So we need the taste of meat with the advantages of vegetarian. And you certainly don't get that with Beyond Meat from what I've read, from what I've seen, and from what restaurants are talking about with those offerings. So I think we are going to see more flexitarian offerings, more people looking for vegetarian, not the strict vegetarian. I think there's definitely a place for that. But people are looking to diversify, partially for economic reasons. Meat's going to be getting more expensive. So are we going to be able to offer vegetarian dishes at a cheaper price? There's something there. When you've got a group of friends going out, there'll be some people who are going to be like, I don't really want a $40 steak. I don't have that much money in my wallet today. So they're the ones who might, they're going to say, I'm going to go the vegetarian option. I'm looking for something a little bit healthier. There will be people who want the healthier option, and of course the greenhouse gas people as well. So there's lots of reasons that people are going to be thinking about vegetarianism. I think meat is going to become a little bit more of a treat, something that you'll do on a less regular basis just because of pricing and the lack of available or disposable income that people are going to have. Trend number 2, it's a biggie. There'll be no surprises to have me talking about it, and that is delivery. So what has changed in delivery? Well, for starters, so in Australia, we had Deliveroo leave, and surprisingly, that came as a shock to some people. I've been talking about the Australian market being nowhere near big enough for Deliveroo, DoorDash, Uber Eats and Menulog for a couple of years now. I think they got a bit of a pass when COVID came out and so many restaurants needed to go to delivery. And of course, so many restaurants closed because they couldn't make delivery work economically. So we're seeing a consolidation in the market. That is probably a long time overdue. What we are seeing is restaurants either struggling to do their own delivery because it's profitable, or we're seeing some that are really starting to do pickup, order direct and save, people trying to move away from the delivery aggregators. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, there is the lack of quality control. 2, the lack of quality control. So in the past, it was the concern that your delivery rider was going to eat a few fries while they were there because they weren't earning a lot of money. The other concern, which is the overriding concern when we talk to restaurants about delivery, is the fact that someone just may not turn up. You might cook it, you might say it's ready to go, and it might just be sitting there left on the pass for 30 minutes because labour has become such a big drama. And of course, I thought that, the only real innovation that the delivery aggregators came up with was the ability to pay below the award wage in a legal manner, well, legal-ish. And there's been developments on the legal front there with some of these delivery aggregators as well. But they say that they're independent contractors. So if you'd only make $5 an hour, well, that's your fault for making a bad decision around being a delivery rider. But because of that, because it was such a crappy job, it was the job of last resort. Now the fact that the labour market's really tight, there are people who are getting high-paying jobs with no experience. Now, those people used to be your Uber riders and your menu log riders and your Deliveroo riders. So there's a significant decrease in the numbers of riders who are available, and that is feeding into increased costs for delivery. Customers are starting to wear a delivery charge. On top of that, it's the decreasing reliability. Is someone actually going to turn up? Now, we know that delivery is hyper-local. And it's really interesting. When you talk to restaurant owners, you will find that in one suburb, it will be owned by a certain delivery company. And maybe 3 miles down the road, it will be all one other company. And that's because of that network effect. You need customers, you need restaurants, and you need the delivery riders. And it's really hard to get that. And once you've got it, it becomes quite difficult to challenge it. So it is hyper-local. All of this means that restaurants are looking for alternatives. Some of the slower restaurants, there's a lot of restaurants who have got really complex, effective, and critically profitable ways of handling delivery. So some of the options that are on the table, some of the options that are becoming more popular with restaurants, and I think will continue to increase in popularity over 2023, will be restaurants that are doing pickup only. This means that you're no longer constrained with the number of tables that you've got out the front. You've got high margin product going out the door because it's going to be at the same price or maybe even slightly discounted. Because critically, remember, there's very minimal front of house impact for pickup. And in the old days, pickup in some places was really quite big. Pickup is great for restaurants, but also there are people who are going to be looking for that opportunity to save $5 or $10. And you can do that when it's pickup only, and people will pay that, particularly on the size of the order. And the bigger the order, the more money that you're making. So there's good reasons there to be thinking about pickup only, particularly, and I see it as incremental income and incremental profit if you're not doing delivery at the moment. So that's a space that we're seeing a lot of interest in. The other one is people who are going to do their own delivery. There can be really good opportunities there. And a couple of ways that you can skin that cat. So the first thing that you can do is just offer delivery or pickup by itself with you doing it. So you're going to have all of the drivers, all of the cars. Now, this is the old-fashioned way that it used to be done. This is the way that pizza's been delivered for, probably 60 years. And critically, I know, so in Australia, the largest food delivery company is Domino's. They do crushingly well when it comes to delivering food. So more than Uber Eats and Deliveroo. Well, there's more interest in Google searches than them. And I think this is a really important thing to remember. They're doing delivery. They're doing it profitably. We did a podcast a couple of years ago now about their really, really sophisticated market differentiation thing. So they do have different prices for pizza. They offer free delivery, but that pizza is going to cost you a lot more if you get it delivered rather than pick up, because I actually think that their brand promise is around pizza delivery, but they don't actually want to deliver the pizza. They want you to come and pick it up, and they use pricing to signal that. They make it really worthwhile if they're going to drive out and drop a pizza out to you. Have a think about that. Now, the other thing that some restaurants do is that they'll do both. They'll do their own delivery and they'll use Uber Eats, Menulog, Deliveroo, whoever it is. That can work quite well, particularly if you're worried about, the fact that everyone's on Uber Eats, so I've got to be there. That's fine. Be on Uber Eats. There's a couple of things that you can do. one, charge more, and two, drop a coupon or a flyer into every delivery that you do with Uber Eats and say, order direct and save. You can put your QR code in there and they'll go to your website. They'll use your own online ordering system. We've got Restolo, which is quite cheap and effective and works really well. There's plenty that you can use. Some people use Shopify. That way, you've got the customer discoverability of Uber Eats. If your food is great and customers are going to order from you again, they'd be crazy to use Uber Eats. They would be happy to come and get the food direct from you. Then you can do the delivery. And we see typically price savings of 10 to 15% there because you're not taking that high margin. The other thing that you can do is to say, next time, skip Uber Eats, come and pick it up, and this is the price that you'll pay. Now, if you're not paying that 35% commission that Uber Eats is trying to hit you up for, you've got a lot cheaper product. A lot of customers are going to be thinking about that. And that's the last thing, just as a profitability thing. Make sure that you're marking up your food by that 35%. It's critical to be able to do that. Margins are too tight these days, particularly with inflation. We've talked about that. Particularly with wages. We're going to talk about that as well. So there are a couple of things that you want to be thinking about in the way that delivery is changing. And because this is the really big thing, I don't think that there are very many restaurants out there who are just using one delivery service. They're often using multiple ones, and that's so that they can play them off and try and get a bit cheaper commission. I don't think that there's very many who are not passing on most, if not all, of the surcharge that they are doing, because it's really just a tax on that delivery. It's very expensive. You need to be recovering those costs. So that's delivery. We're seeing a lot of space in that. Market consolidation, increasing costs, decreasing profitability, and this is why a lot of people are looking at that. One thing that I've talked about in the past, which we haven't seen yet, but I think we will see, is some of the big chains like your McDonald's looking at bringing delivery in-house. I think if Domino's can do it, then there's a fairly good chance that McDonald's is going to be able to do it. And that would create a significant profitability issue for the delivery aggregators. Because remember, we're not sure what the profitability is for most of them, but we do know that they're losing money in general. So this is going to be a very interesting space to watch. Now, one of the dangers that I face when I come up with these predictions of what the next year is going to be like is that it goes back to something that Yogi Berra, the baseball player, said. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Something that I spoke about first, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, was drone delivery. Well, I don't think we're there yet, but this is something that you definitely want to be thinking about in the medium term, because it is picking up. Autonomous delivery. So delivery predominantly by drones. I think self-driving vehicles, this is something else that we've been thinking about. And, this is Uber's long-term plan. They will get rid of the Uber drivers. They will go and they'll get rid of the Uber delivery riders as well. Their business will become incredibly profitable once all of those people lose their jobs. That's going to be a tragedy for them. There'll be no one interesting to talk to when you catch an Uber. Their long-term plan, though, will be self-driving vehicles to do deliveries. And I would have thought a little van's going to come up and you will put a PIN code in that'll be on the app, and you'll open up a little oven that will have your nice and hot food in there. The technology is not too far away to be able to do that, particularly in certain little areas. However, what I'm thinking is we're going to see more of sooner will be drone deliveries. So Walmart currently has got 37 stores that you can order up to 10,000 items from, and they're experimenting quite aggressively with that. There's a few limits. It has to be between, I think it's daylight hours, and on top of that, you've got to be within 1 mile of the store. But they are working on getting that right. Now, they're not doing this as a commercial thing. What they're trying to see is what the art of the possible is, particularly as more and more drones are purchased and more drone flights get done. They're going to advance the technology of the drones. And a lot of people who say that this is a crazy idea, they're looking at the drones that we have today. I think there's incredible progress that's being made in drones in size, capability, and critically, autonomy. So the drone pilots, they're pretty excited about it, but I think that will disappear and the drones will be able to fly themselves. We're not too far off with that. McKinsey & Co. have got a report that says there's been 660,000 drone deliveries in the last 3 years. Critically, they're expecting 1.5 million drone deliveries in 2023. So how many of them are going to be food? I don't know. One of the things that I think will be interesting is supermarket deliveries where the food is not so temperature dependent. Pizza that is cold, that's quite a no-no, and it gets windy up there. So that's going to be one of those things. There's going to have to be thinking around how that is being transported. Having said that, a flying oven or pizza warmer, that's probably not too far down out of the bounds of reality. So very interesting to see that space develop. I don't think we're going to see any really meaningful work being done in this space. We know that people have been playing with it. We've seen Domino's doing both drone deliveries and little robot deliveries. That was a few years ago. I think more and more people are going to be looking at this. The technology is accelerating to be able to see that. And that's going to be interesting. It's going to open up a whole new market for a lot of restaurants. I wanted to drop something in about the menu, the kind of food that people need to be thinking about, and talking to a few restaurant owners, looking at the demographic changes, looking at the world, comfort food. There are quite a few people who are thinking that comfort food is going to be a big thing in 2023. There's a couple of reasons for that. Inflation, that creates a lot of concerns for a lot of people. Job losses, we are starting to see some really, really, really big numbers of people losing their jobs tragically. Now, that has a flow-on effect. Obviously, there's a harsh economic reality for the people who lose their jobs, but it has a flow-on effect. If someone that you know, if a family member loses their job, that will unsettle you. You're going to be concerned. Is your job secure? On top of that, we've got a not insignificant war going on in Europe at this time. All of these things create quite a bit of fear. And that fear can feed on itself. And we saw that, I think, with COVID, with the pandemic. You could see that there were people who, there was fear. They were talking to people who were fearful, and it just sort of dragged a lot of people down. This year, it's going to be same, but different. So rather than people worrying about COVID, not so much, as a lot of the world is now post-COVID, hopefully, touch wood. What we're seeing is that the economic hangover from COVID is creating a lot of concerns for people as they see more and more people who are entering into very harsh economic times. So I think it's important to bring it back to basics. What is the role of a restaurant? What is the one thing that you can do that makes you unique? And one of those things is the original meaning of restaurant, which I've said before, it's to restore the soul. Now, for some people, for some businesses, that plays an important part. Other times it's convenience. But I think there's a really big opportunity when we go to comfort food. Comfort food means different things to different peoples in different parts of the world. Generally, it's food that provides a feeling of consolation, well-being, safety, security. Typically, it'll have a high sugar or carbohydrate content, and it's going to be associated with childhood or home cooking. I like to think of it as being the food that someone's mother would have cooked for them. Going back to that psychological route where when a person is a child, for many people, it is a time where they're happy. There's a lot less concerns in the world. If they've had a good childhood, a good upbringing, then it's a time when they were really happy. Any food that takes them back there is food that is going to be really quite valuable because people, they're not going to be buying that meal. They're not going to be buying the food. And as I've always said, don't sell the food, sell the experience, because that's where the margin is. Comfort food, often it's actually really quite cost effective, quite cheap kind of food to be able to produce because it is quite simple. So quick in the, it's light on in the ingredients and it's quick to produce. So it can be quite profitable, and it's something that they're going to eat it. If it's well cooked, they're going to think, yes, this reminds me of when I was a child, and they're going to feel that little bit safer. It's interesting. For the same reason that going to the movies tends to do well in an economic downturn. And that's because people are looking for a little bit of escapism. So there we go. Now, we've been going for about half an hour, so we'll cut it here. We'll come back next week with the rest of the trends. We've talked about vegetarianism and flexitarianism, multiple reasons why that's going to be popular this year. Delivery, pickup, have a think about how your product is going to work for your customers in a way that's going to be profitable for you. That's absolutely critical. And lastly, comfort food. So we've only gone through 3 of our top 10 trends for 2023. Next week, we're going to be looking at some of those mega trends and how they're playing out. The big one here is going to be labor. Then we're going to look at some marketing specific components, the way that the demographics are changing and the way that you'll need to be thinking about responding in that. And we'll discuss some ways that restaurants are already cherry picking components out of those demographic changes to make really profitable weeks. So that's about it. If you've got a trend that you think that we've missed or that you'd like for us to talk about, please hit us up on social media. If you see us on Facebook or one of the other socials, let us know. Keen to continue the conversation. The other thing is, if you've got anything out of today's podcast, please share it with a mate in the industry. Word of mouth is the way that we've been able to build the podcast up to having over 500,000 downloads, which is crazy, particularly when you think of, it's over 100 countries. Absolutely amazing to see where we get all of the people contacting us from. And you can always hit us up over email as well. That's about it. You have a busy week. Bye.
Want more customers for your restaurant, cafe or takeout? Every month, our marketing tools and information are used by thousands of restaurant owners just like you to help them find more customers and turn them into repeat customers. All of our tools and information is designed specifically for restaurant owners. We know you don't have a lot of time to spend marketing or learning complicated procedures, so our tools are quick and easy to use. If you're looking to increase your revenue and profits or want to work less hours, check out marketingforrestaurants.com.